I'm officially attempting to train my plants to get through a drought. Yes, that's right. There are some things you can do in the beginning of the season to train your plants to get through this drought year. Number one, and oddly one of the easiest to perform, is restricting water. Yes, sounds counterintuitive, but definitely a great idea. When we restrict water, particularly in these beginner months, we see really good results. The reason for this is because we make our roots work, meaning we make them dig for water and dig for nutrients. And while there's not really high heat outside, we can actually train these roots to dig for this stuff before the heat hits in August. You can actually water only once every 3 days, maybe 5 days if you're using a mulch. This will actually help those plant roots develop a really hardy stalk. Now, one way to test its time to water is with a soil sleuth, or in the case where you can actually stick your finger in, all you're doing is feeling for moisture. If you stick your finger in and you feel no moisture up until the second knuckle, then it's time to water. But if you stick it in and it's very clearly still moist, you can leave these plants alone until you run out of that water, and then water when necessary. Now, the truth is restricting water only works for some plants, so tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, okra, a number of different flower species. But ones it won't work for is actually these poor brassicas, which are really going to struggle in a drought season. So if you're growing kohlrabi, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, you name it, Brussels sprouts, you may choose to just not grow these in a drought year and go with tomatoes and peppers in its place. But if you love brassicas like I do, then you still obviously want to plant them. Now, the best way to get these guys through a drought season is to water often and frequently, maybe daily in some cases. You'll want to hit the leaves with these because the leaves will actually enjoy that cool influx of water, which brings me to my next tip, shade cloth. Shade cloth can help enormously in a drought season. A drought doesn't necessarily just mean the ambient heat is high, it can also mean the sun is intense, and blocking the plants from that sun is important. A 40% shade cloth is going to work great for this, and it's going to prevent these plants from bolting, which will often happen in a drought season. So shade cloth is my second tip for getting through a drought year, and it can actually prevent against scalding of your tomatoes, the flowers dropping off of cucumbers, tomatoes, you name it. So you don't have to just use shade cloth on your brassicas, you can use shade cloth all over the garden this year. Tip number 3 is mulch, and in particular a very thick layer of mulch. I'm talking several inches if possible. The thicker the mulch, the cooler the soil will be and the more moisture it will retain. So you don't have to buy mulch like I did in the case of straw. If you have access to grass, which many of you do, unfortunately I don't anymore, so grass is a great alternative to mulch. Using this grass and laying it on thick throughout the entire year is going to be incredibly important. Of course, make sure you're cutting your lawn before your weeds set seed, because you don't want to bring that into the garden, and in the fall you want to remove it and compost it rather than incorporating it into the soil, which can actually affect or lock up your nitrogen, which is obviously important for plant growth. The next hack for getting through a drought is everyone's nightmare, and that is weeding. So weeding will actually reduce the competition with your plants, whether it's transplants, seeds, you name it. So you want to weed on a regular basis to reduce that competition. Now, while weeding is important to reduce competition for water and nutrients, also making sure your plant spacing is good in this situation is also key. So if you're the type of person where you're not sure if you're going to be able to water on a regular basis, you want to avoid overplanting your garden. Overplanting simply means not respecting plant spacing that's stated on the package or on the transplant. So 1 foot for a tomato means 1 foot for a tomato, and you shouldn't be placing any companion plants or intercropping in any way with lettuce or nasturtium, etc. in that space. This is important if you want to get through a drought unscathed, if you are not willing to water on a very regular basis. Now, my last hack may not be available to everyone, but it is a self-watering bed. So I do have a self-watering bed here behind me. You can get self-watering buckets. I've done a video on that as well. And all of these are obviously going to help you get through a drought. And this is particularly true if you have a busy lifestyle where you're not going to be able to water on a continual basis, in particular in August when it's really, really warm. Other than that, when it comes to getting through a drought season, pick the proper varieties. Make sure you're watching for signs of heat stress or sun stress on your plants, whether that's sunburn or wilting, and act appropriately. Use the shade cloth, use the mulch, and water train here now when you can before the really high heats hit. I'm praying for rain for all of us, but if we don't get it, we will still get through. Don't worry. I'll talk to you guys next time.